eBay has reinvented vehicle buying. From click to curb, everything's covered. Ever try to buy a car online and end up in a parking lot with a stranger and some blind trust? That era is over. Now with Secure Purchase, eBay isn't just where you find your car. It's where you buy it, start to finish. Title, financing, registration, delivery, it's all built in. This is the modern way to buy your next ride on eBay. eBay. Things people love. Secure Purchase is powered by Caramel Dealer Services, LLC, an eBay subsidiary.
The road is calling. Embrace the thrill of the drive with the fully electric Audi Q6 e-tron. Featuring effortless power and advanced Audi tech, the next chapter of Audi is here.
This Steve Jones Show podcast is now loading. The Steve Jones Show podcast is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Bringing you an in-depth look at Penn State sports and more. This is the Steve Jones Show on News Radio 1070 WKOK. The Steve Jones Show is presented by Sunbury Motor Company, Purdy Insurance, and Brewers Outlet. Now from the Sunbury Motors Studio, here's Steve Jones.
This half hour brought to you by Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, the best in new inventory, great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee. Terrific service department that backs it up every step of the way, whether it happens to be quick lane, inspections, routine, difficult. They handle it all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors, Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummels Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Always great to be joined by the outstanding Neal Coolong. Sir, welcome. Great to have you with us.
As always, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me.
It's the Jets in the opener. Talk about your basic cruel irony. What's your thought just on getting out of the gate? And is there any value to how the Steelers approach the preseason with their starters that plays a factor in the opener?
I think if we look at week one of the NFL season, you see a pretty large amount of change from week one to week two. And usually it's teams in week one seem to kind of figure out who they are. In some cases, a little too late. Maybe it's a good spot for them to be. I mean, the one that I look at is kind of the paradigm example is the Steelers are coming off a great preseason. They played all their guys. Everyone got in. Everyone felt good about it. And they got boat raced by the 49ers. I mean, the 49ers could have picked their score in that game. That's one of the most one-sided football games I've ever seen. Now, we can obviously point out San Francisco was in the Super Bowl that year, and Pittsburgh was, clearly not. So there's something to be said just overall about the talent of one team versus another. But the preparation comes into mind because you'll also see good teams come out very slow. They're not playing particularly well. They don't seem to be all that sharp. There's a lot to be said, I think, about the combination of a little less training camp time, certainly the physical parts of training camp, one fewer preseason game, whether that matters or not, I think is debatable. All of it kind of leading to a shorthanded product going into week one. It almost seems like teams are okay, and obviously they're not going to tell you this, but it seems like they're okay with week one really kind of being the final preparation for everything else. And you could make the argument, too, while one game matters at the end, they have extremely intelligent statistical, mathematical people who work there that can kind of run scenarios to play out how everything is going to happen. It's obviously not going to be accurate, but they have a very good idea how many wins they'll need to advance to the playoffs, to get a home game in the first round, to get a bye. Right. They have those scenarios all built out in mind, and they can kind of project game to game based on what they have, what they need to do, what their chances are in each of those games. So in some cases, you can make the argument week one is a good time to get a real feel for your team, kind of get a sense of how the live scenarios, as Mike Tomlin would say, under the stadium lights, will play out as they go. And I'm not saying that they're trying to lose or anything like that. It's just this game, especially if you're playing somebody outside of your division, this game does not mean as much as the rest of the games will. That's just how it works. You don't know how the hands are going to be dealt across the league. You don't know where injuries are going to be piling up. But if you are competing for a playoff spot within the last 5 weeks of the season, that's kind of when your real season starts. So a lot of this is, let's figure out how we can be the best by the end of the season. And for the Steelers, they got off to a better start last year than they typically have over the last 10 years or so, and that probably got them into the playoffs. But with that, too, they had to change quarterbacks and be able to be a little bit more unpredictable against a lot of teams, and that's really where both of these teams are in Week 1, the Jets and the Steelers. Now, the twist is they know each other's quarterbacks pretty well, but they don't know what the other team is going to do with them under center. I mean, we're a long way from Aaron Rodgers running out on Monday Night Football with the American flag, and everyone's all fired up for 6 plays of his 2023 season. It didn't go particularly well with him and the Jets last year. I think Fields did fairly well with the Steelers last season. They might have a little bit better of a perspective of who he is in a short stint of time than a new coaching staff and everything kind of being turned over in New York. So maybe the Steelers have an advantage with that, but I would expect both teams to kind of look at this fairly conservatively, not really go all out right away, and probably a lower scoring defensive type of game.
How interested are you now to see in practical application the approach the Steelers use offensively with Aaron Rodgers in the pass game?
You cut out a little bit. What I got from that was the kind of a philosophy on passing game for the Steelers with Aaron Rodgers. My guess would be they're not going to take a whole lot of deep shots, as in 18-plus yards down the field. I think they'll run digs. I think they'll run skinny posts, but I don't think they're going to run a whole lot of flies. What they're really going to look to do is control possession as best they can, try to set up scenarios in which they can have high percentage passing. In other words, a lot of stuff I think we've seen out of Steelers offenses recently, when you don't have a big arm, big talent quarterback, you tend to kind of compress things philosophically, and with that, you're going to bow it out to the ends where there are more angled passing. Higher percentage passes tend to go to the outsides in short in the flats. I would expect they're going to do those kinds of things. I really think Pittsburgh wants to run the ball and control possession that way. I think the passing game will be probably, if they're doing middle stuff, it's going to be shorter curls, things like that. Utilize the tight ends as much as they can. Maybe run some seams. Try to get their tight ends involved, probably use a lot of 12 personnel. But mainly they're going to want to play physical ball control football. I don't think that means DK Metcalf is going to get anything less than 10 targets, but I don't think he's going to be challenging, on the deep third of the field. They're not going to try to drag safeties deep with them and kill people right away. They're going to want to be efficient. They're going to want to be protective of the ball and try to maximize their opportunities through the amount of plays that they can run.
Interesting on running the ball, because neither one of the tight ends are considered to be elite blockers at that spot. What kind of concern is that?
I think we'll find out. It's a very interesting question. The thing is, to me, philosophically, 12 personnel, it's meant to show run. You're stretching out the line. You're covering 3 gaps with 2 blockers, the opportunity to double team in any one of those spots. You have that open for you. But in reality, 12 personnel is really about attacking the seams and the outs. It's forcing defensive personnel more inward instead of outward. And theoretically, you're not defending the flank as much, and that gives you more opportunities on the wide side of the field should you want to take it. But it really is higher percentage matchup advantage building kinds of stuff. If you have tight ends that you're not exactly sure what they're going to do, a guy like Pat Freiermuth, we see him split out into the slot, reasonably often, not all the time, but that weapon is in their bag. Jonathan Smith has made a career of that. We'll see how healthy he is heading into this game, but by and large, they're able to attack the 6 to 10 yard space coming off the line, which means you got to bring somebody down or put them on a linebacker. You're either going to put a safety on him or a linebacker on him, at least to show that. And in a lot of ways, too, it kind of makes you play a zone, if not as a play call, but even as in practical application, just because there's a lot of bodies around that spot. It's not really an offense that's designed for a lot of run after catch, but it does create the right type of matchup in being able to isolate where their coverage is going to be and make them show who's going to come down onto who. It's revealing about the defense, what they're going to do, especially when you add motion into that. So there's a lot that you can do out of 12. You can split things out, move guys around, come up with a different formation based on what the defense is showing you. And I think that's the design. We're going to see a lot of that this year, but it can morph. They have the right type of personnel to be able to utilize the space on the field and try to take advantage of what the defense is trying to put them out there. But a lot of that really is predicated on at least the threat of you running the ball successfully. So they're going to need to be able to do that. If they can't block, they're going to figure it out. But I would say, too, that you don't have to be an all-pro if you have somebody else taking the inside with tight end, kind of getting the outside and climbing to the next level and getting somebody's way. So inside zone, outside zone, we'll see a lot of that in their running game, trying to set up passing situations out of that 12 personnel.
Okay, I felt like the Micah Parsons deal, to me, felt like a Reggie White moment for Green Bay. Do you feel the same?
I think that's a fair way to put it. It'd be easier to parse out, I think, if we knew who the other teams were who were interested. And a report came out today that there were 3 other teams who were interested in Micah Parsons. But interestingly, the reporter also noted right after that they weren't going to trade him within the division. So you have to kind of think that maybe at least one of the teams interested came from the NFC East, and naturally my thought would be it's the Eagles, right? I mean, it would have only made sense if somehow he went to the Eagles and you would have watched Dallas burn if that was the case. But for the Packers, man, it's a gamble. And I think if we look at this in a vacuum, which is impossible to do with anything related to Jerry Jones, but if we look at this just in a Team A and Team B perspective, Green Bay is taking on an awful lot of risk with this. Yep. It's fun to bash Jerry Jones, and we all like to rip on the Cowboys, and this move looks crazy on the surface. But at the end of the day, what it comes down to for me is you had a player who was, if we believe the reporting, who was offered a contract that would have made him the highest paid non-quarterback in the game. Mm-hmm. Typically, that's kind of defined as the top of the market for where he's going to be. Yeah. They made him that offer. He didn't want it. Secondly, you have the Packers. Now they're leveraged because they're willing to give up 2 first-round picks to acquire him. They're obviously going to give him a contract extension, so that might tack on a few dollars. But they paid him, what was the final number? I think 12% over that amount. Now, in all fairness, it's possible the Green Bay Packers have the highest paid non-quarterback in the game 2 years in a row. And what that means in the market is that you overpaid because that mark is usually raised year to year. If no one else is going to top that, it kind of suggests that maybe you made a bad deal. And on top of it, keep in mind, Jordan Love is now in year 2 of that contract. If he does really well, he's not going to really, like the idea of not being close to the top because you made some other guy who's never even played on this team the highest paid at his position. Where am I in all of this? He's going to start to want a contract extension, or at the very least, you're going to have to give Jordan Love a significant extension during the life of the Micah Parsons deal. Now, none of this says anything about the impact that he can make. He's a great player. We know that. Maybe some questions by some of whether or not he's going to dominate on the ground. I think that's grossly overblown considering the value that he brings against the pass, which tends to be more important overall. It's an all-in move. They have a very good defensive complement now to an offense that we should see take another step forward this season. So they're going to have to do it, I think, fairly quickly. But, the nature of the NFL and the salary cap, you got to remember, the cap increases every year. So the payments in later years of a contract tend to be proportionate to what the player is getting on the cap previously. So if you are getting 21% of the cap, your salary is going to kind of match what projections are of 21% of that year's cap. So I'm not worried about a cap space issue for the Packers and their ability to get talent, except for, you're down 2 first-round picks. But teams will find a way to do that. And in my opinion, we're in an era that free agency and trades are just as viable as the draft has been as far as acquiring cornerstone as well as foundation, kind of add-on types of players in order to win a championship. You need to put all those things together. That's what Roseman has done in Philadelphia. I think that's kind of the gold standard right now. Les Snead with the Rams hasn't drafted in the first round in however long. He just got the last 2 out of 7, I think. They got a Super Bowl championship. They're a playoff win team from last year. So you have to be able to acquire talent, and sometimes you just got to make a big move. And I think that's what Green Bay did, and obviously time will tell, but a lot of risk for them in this. It's not quite as simple as they fleece the Cowboys. I don't think that's necessarily the case.
With the Walmart app, you can squeeze in those final days of summer and nail that back-to-school shopping list. So keep working on that tan and let Walmart Express Delivery handle the rest. Chromebooks, Clorox wipes, Sharpies, glue sticks, pens, pencils, and more. All delivered in as fast as an hour. So pour yourself another iced tea. Summer's not over. Last-minute back-to-school supplies delivered fast. The Walmart you thought you knew is now new. Subject to availability. Fees and restrictions apply.
Make your next move with American Express Business Platinum. Enjoy complimentary access to the American Express Global Lounge Collection, and with a welcome offer of 150,000 points after you spend $20,000 on purchases on the card within your first 3 months of membership, your business can soar to new heights. Terms apply. Learn more at americanexpress.com/business-platinum. Amex Business Platinum. Built for business by American Express.
Which then brings me up, the Cowboys then made a move financially, and they signed Deron Bland, the corner. And I remember he got off to a great start. He had picks, interceptions. And I was talking to a group one day, and they said, what do you think of a guy like that? I said, well, you want to know why he has interceptions? I said, because they don't think he's very good, and they're throwing at him. And they're still throwing at him. What did you think of that signing?
The total dollars to me surprised me a little bit.
Yeah,
I definitely think there's a reaction kind of sense to it, and I don't know if it's Jerry Jones really doesn't like the negative press as much as he wants to tell you that he does. So he needed to make a move on top of that. I think for the sake of business, it might have been better if he did it with Pickens. But with Bland, you're getting a solid player. You're paying him, not top of market, but up there. I don't think it's necessarily a bad cornerback contract. It just seems like that because there really aren't very many cornerbacks getting that much money, because there aren't many of them that are doing everything that Bland is doing in that defense. So in a way, it's you have to pay because he's the guy who's there. He's the guy who's producing stuff. But whatever the amount is, it's easier to go with the devil you know versus the devil you don't. It takes a lot to develop a cornerback. There are not many of them that reach that level. There half as many cornerbacks in the NFL get paid proportionately in the market to receivers. So you look at it that way, it's harder to find them. They tend to be guys that you have to develop from the middle rounds, kind of like Bland. And when they get to that point, you pay them or you lose them. And it's not going to take much in free agency for guys to get signed. There are cornerbacks that make big dollar deals in free agency all the time. Most of it is because teams know that cornerback seems to be, in my opinion, the most important depth position on the team, and you need a lot of them. So regardless of who you're paying and who's at the top, you still have to add cornerbacks every year. So in some cases, teams will just say, you know what, we got guys developing, we've drafted other guys, we don't have to pay this guy because we need 5 of them, not 1. And I think Dallas is just kind of saying, we want to have our foundation guy here in place, and we're going to add to that as we go, like we always do. But we want to get one guy that we know, that we're comfortable with. He knows what he's doing within this defense, and all is comfortable on that end. You pay a premium with that, of course, knowing that that's the position Bland is in, and knowing the fact that you had all this money earmarked for Parsons is no longer there. I believe Jerry when he said 2 weeks ago they weren't going to trade him. They had that money accounted for. Now they spent a good chunk less to keep Bland in place, and they have money moving forward to next year. That's their perspective in kind of a moving on sense. Maybe Bland got another $10 million on that deal that he might not have otherwise gotten in the market, but it's an investment of convenience for Dallas in a lot of ways.
Sir, always a pleasure. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, guys.
The great Neal Coolong in this half hour, brought to you by our good friends at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. Ford, Kia, Hyundai, the best in new inventory, great pre-owned inventory with the Sunbury Motors guarantee, and a terrific service department that backs it up every step of the way. Whether it's quick lane inspections, routine, difficult, all at Sunbury Motors, 4th Street in Sunbury. Sunbury Motors Kia, routes 11 and 15 in Hummel's Wharf, and online at sunburymotors.com. On News Radio 1070 WKOK.
Party time, game time, or just fun time. Doesn't matter what time it is, because it's Brewers Outlet time. The beverage supermarket has the area's largest beer selection. Imports, microbrews, ciders, and domestics. Pick from over 100 ice-cold 12-packs and dozens of 24-ounce singles. Soda, snacks, hot sauces, fresh roasted peanuts. Make it one-stop party shopping, and don't forget the pickle bar. So whatever you're celebrating or just doing it up, Brewers Outlet, Reagan Street, Sunbury wants to see you. And thank you for your years of patronage.
A lot has changed since 1915 when the Mertz family began selling cars here in Central PA at Sunbury Motor Company. But one thing that hasn't changed is the Sunbury Motor Company's commitment to satisfying more customers, selling more cars, and providing you with a tradition of trust. Whether you visit Sunbury Motors Ford, Sunbury Motors Hyundai, or Sunbury Motors Kia, you know you're getting the area's best selection and best prices on both new and pre-owned vehicles. SMC's values of hard work and dedication are as prevalent today as they were over 100 years ago. They take pride in satisfying Central Pennsylvania's automotive needs and providing their customers with the best buying experience possible. Come visit Sunbury Motors Ford and Sunbury Motors Hyundai in the North 4th Street Auto Plaza, Sunbury, or Sunbury Motors Kia on the Strip in Hummel's Wharf. Sunbury Motor Company, owned and operated by the Mertz family since 1915.